G'day guys, Toss20 here and welcome back to City Skylines Down Under. Today we are working on the shops of Broken Hill, this little town I am building somewhere in Australia. And if you are new to this channel and you are familiar with the name Broken Hill, then no, I am not building Broken Hill in New South Wales. I'm merely stealing that name and building my very own style of town. But I am trying really hard to kind of keep with a bit of an Australian theme. So my first question to everybody right now is, if you're an Australian, what do you think? Am I hitting the Australian feel of a country town? And if you're not Australian, I know I've got a lot of my audience is actually from the States, and then I think it goes Germany and England and many other different places in the world. I'm very curious to see whether this is similar to towns in your country or in places that you have visited. Please hit me up in the comments below. Tell me, are you from a country town in your country? Are you familiar with a certain style of what a country town kind of looks like? I remember in the last episode we talked about big backyards and how the backyards in this town that I'm building need to be quite large because there's a lot of space. There's a lot of these sort of houses have quite large backyards, and people kind of hit me up and said, yeah, well, this is very similar in my country, or I've noticed this in Canada, or blah blah blah. It was very interesting, people talking about it, and a lot of different facts came out. So definitely hit me up. I'm very curious. What I'm doing right now is I'm plopping down this Mitre 10, and if you're not familiar with Mitre 10, it's a hardware store that's in Australia. I'd be curious to see if it's in any other country. It might be in our neighbour country, maybe New Zealand might have a Mitre 10, but this is a classic Australian hardware store. It's a big chain, and it's pretty much in every town you would ever go to. So I really needed it, and it's made by an asset creator called Crazy Glue It. He very kindly made a couple of assets for me that you will see in this episode and in this series. So definitely stay tuned for that. In this episode, I do some really, really cool detailing, and you're going to see some of what I think my finest detailed works in this episode just a little bit later. I'm going to plop down a shopping centre with a really nice car park, a couple of shop fronts, and I'm also going to work on some street side parking that I think looks really, really good, and I think it fits in really nicely with this theme and country towns. I feel like all country towns seem to have this particular sort of style. On the topic of country towns, you'll see me very shortly start moving my... Yeah, right now I'm doing it. I'm moving the shops just a little bit away from the street, and the reason why I'm doing that is I've noticed that in a lot of towns in Australia, the width between the streets and the shop fronts is actually a lot larger than it is in the cities, and I'm trying to think whether that's from the fact that there's more space in a place like this, or whether it kind of fits in with a bit more of a colonial style of when these towns were established. I'm not really sure, and if you want to hit me up in the comments, please do, because I would be very curious to find out. But that is just a reoccurring theme that I wanted to achieve in this city, and it's really easy to do. I just plot down all those buildings and then just drag them away from the front, and by doing that, it actually allows me to have a bit more space to put down a bit of parking, a bit of roadside parking. Now, I'm really happy with how this turns out, and I'm just going to show you a couple little tips and tricks when it comes to building some roadside parking. So, we're kind of working with a bit of... I was going to do about 45 degrees, but we're doing about 35 degrees here for this parking. I don't think it really matters, but I just felt like this was a much easier spacing for parking like this. And in terms of props used for this, it's not particularly too heavy. There are it's probably about 50 props all up in just this, in this roadside parking. And obviously, because it is all props,
The parking is not actually usable by the cars, but I don't really care. Like, that's not something that will keep me up at night. It's really just for looks, and I mean, in terms of looks, I think it looks pretty damn cool. And of course, I'd need to kind of hide a couple of these areas that don't really match up with some planters. But that also works in really nicely because, you know, these sort of areas do have quite a lot of shrubbery, more like plants and foliage. I mean, I think these sort of towns do have a lot more foliage than places do in the city. And I know you're probably looking at the ground and the texture of this town right now, Broken Hill, and thinking it's a desert. There's no way there'd be as much foliage as I'm plopping down. Well, like Australia is, it's quite arid, and there is a lot of desert in our country. But there is also quite a lot of bushland, and even these deserts, even places around Kalgoorlie. I mean, it's mostly bush, so there's quite a lot of foliage and forest, I guess. And the towns are no exceptions. The towns are actually quite well shaded with trees, and there's quite a lot of different plants and gardens. So that's something that I want to definitely achieve in the city and the actual look. It's actually funny to call this a city because, you know, I'm probably going to switch between the terminology city and town quite a lot. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because although this is definitely not a big city like Springwood or anything else that I've ever built, it is in fact probably still a city. It's still a regional city within Australia, and I probably will switch between the two terminologies, I guess. What you just saw me just do is there was just copied that street side parking, and I'm going to do that a lot of times because you know, once that I've already built the template of it, I don't really need to rebuild it. So I will just copy it in so many different areas, and just change it here and there because, you know, in terms of redoing something you've already done, definitely don't need to do that. So right now I'm just extending some of these backyards, something I spoke about just earlier. Backyards are pretty common around areas in small country towns in Australia. I mean, we've got a lot more space for it, so why not give some people a bit more privacy and a bit more space? And that's no exception for these shops. And right now what I'm doing is I'm going to start detailing a pub that's going to sit on this corner just here. Australia is very well known for its pubs. I mean, we take a lot from the British, and that is just one of the many things we take from them. And pubs are just numerous in Australia, which is really quite lovely. It's really nice. They're always really nice to go and get a meal or have a drink, and because we are such a sunny and hot country, a lot of these pubs have got really lovely sitting areas just out the back, so it's really important that I kind of plop down to quite a lot of different pubs in Broken Hill. Now, I'm pretty sure those umbrellas say Heineken on them, which is obviously an imported beer for us, but it was so cool if I could pop down maybe a couple of Victoria Bitters or some Tui's News or something like that, or even some billboards would be really cool. I mean, if you're an asset creator and you're keen to make me a billboard that says Tui's New or Victoria Bitter, I mean, I will be so very grateful of that. if you feel so generous, I think that'll be really well fitted. Geez, I mean, if you're listening to this, definitely hit me up in the comments. And what other assets do we need to make this Australian town? By the way, I do actually have an asset list just below in the description, so if you're keen to get your hands on a couple of the different assets that I'm using in this build, definitely check that out, and definitely rate it up if you find it useful or helpful. Yeah, check it out and rate it up because you know, I spent quite a long time finding different assets all over the workshop that are based on Australian, or basically based on Australian places. Some of them are really particularly Australian, some of them are just, you know, things that just fit with the Australian style. So, there was a couple of things I was going to talk about in this episode. Oh yeah, just checking out my poster notes right now.
something I was going to talk about is something that happened a couple of months ago that was really, really exciting, and I haven't spoken about it yet. But I was contacted, a couple of months ago by a town planning company, and they'd seen some of my footage, some of my builds, and were really interested to see how I could use this program, this game, to actually create a visual representation of something they wanted to develop in Australia. And this company got in contact. I actually didn't believe them at first, so I was really just ignoring their emails. And then once I kind of like did a bit of fishing, realized they were for real. And they got in touch and wanted me to, well, I actually can't really go into the details of it because the project is still kind of a bit classified, and obviously I was employed by them, so I can't really even show you what the sort of stuff I built in for that project. But in a nutshell, it was really cool. I got to develop something that they wanted to build in Australia, and sent them through the visual representation that I built in the game. And they're really, really pleased with the work that I produced. And I think what's really exciting about that is that they were really impressed with what the game looked like and what I was able to achieve in it. And the entire time I was telling them, it's a game, it's a game, I'm not really doing anything special. They thought it was a program. They thought I was using some sort of high-tech program, and we're pretty blown away with what I could achieve just within a game. And I'm still pretty impressed with what we can actually do within this game. And anyway, well, I've done that, and it was really fun to do, and I really wish I could share it with you guys, but I really can't. But I'm just wondering whether anybody else is doing something similar with this game, whether they're using it for uni assignments, or whether you use it for work purposes, or whether you see a reason or a purpose for this game outside of just making YouTube videos, or even sharing it, or just playing the game in general. Because I feel like there's a lot of possibilities here. I think the ability to create such a realistic city so easy, and the UI works so beautifully. I mean, not all the time, but I mean, it's pretty good. It just kind of shows how much possibility there is within just an engine like this. And I'll be quite curious to see what happens a little bit later on down the track with this game. I feel like we could see this popping up in, I don't know. I could see this game going places way further than just videos on YouTube. But anyway, apart from that, I thought that was really, really cool. I've just done a little bit more detailing, and as you can see, I've got quite a lot of trees and foliage just scattered around this town, which I think really works nicely. I'm trying to get a bit of a mix between Australian natives, like the eucalyptus trees, and they've got some squiggly barks over there too. But I'm also trying to get a bit of a mix of non-native plants, and I can't even think of a non-native plant, but I think it's important to use that because a lot of the plants in Australia are introduced, and especially in cities, a lot of people plant a lot of non-native plants, and so I wanted to get a bit of a mix in here. And it's quite interesting because, I mean, I even thought the eucalyptus tree was really exclusive to Australia. It wasn't until I went to LA a couple of months ago, and I was actually driving in Strict Toaster's car, and we were, just chatting, and we drove past a tree, and it was a eucalyptus tree. It was a gum tree, and I remember just saying like, oh, that's an Australian tree, and we're having a chat about the fact that, I think he had a different name for it. I think he called it a eucalyptus, or a different name, a name that we wouldn't really commonly use. And I remember being really amazed to see it outside of Australia. But then it kind of made sense that it would not just be in an Australian tree. I'd be interested to see if eucalyptus trees are elsewhere in countries, whether you have eucalyptus trees in other countries. I mean, they're really, really iconic in Australia because so many koalas live up in trees, eucalyptus trees, and very rarely do you see one, but every now and again you might just see one kind of going from branch to branch, or even scurrying across the ground. I've only seen a couple of times,
And the cool thing about koalas is you can actually see them in towns. So, I think if Broken Hill, this town right here, it would be a real town, then, I reckon you definitely see a couple of them floating around in the trees. But anyway, we're getting a bit off topic. What I've done right now is I've just plopped down a hospital mixed in with a bit of a pharmacy. There's a hotel, a pretty awful looking hotel there on the left, and a couple of office buildings. Those office buildings are probably about 6 stories high, and that might be the limit of how high I will go in this town. I don't know. I'm still kind of figuring out the logistics. I mean, at the moment, I'm kind of going with a really specific Kalgoorlie theme, but I'm pretty keen to kind of steer away from that eventually, and even start working on a bit more of our own sort of a theme. If you think I should go a little higher, I mean, let me know, because definitely want to get your opinions as much as my own, and I would like to keep this place as mostly just a town rather than going into a bit more of a higher, but a bit more of a skyline city. I want it to be a bit more of a regional city. A couple other things that we're going to talk about, looking at my list. Oh yeah, so I mean, YouTube does this really cool thing at producing the analytics of the channel, and so I can see really clearly who is tuning in and how people are tuning in to the channel. I can even see the devices people are using to watch the episodes, and all this sort of stuff kind of helps me out with how to market each episode, and even kind of communicate with you guys better, which is really fun and I really get into. Something that I've been noticing, which is really cool, is mostly on my channel, I mean, the people who view my channel, the countries that view my channel the most would be the United States. I mean, the States usually, I mean, I'm just looking at my stats right now. The United States, I mean, is usually the top group, the top audience of people. I mean, we're usually sitting at about 20% for United States. And then it's usually Germany, about 11% or 10%. Then United Kingdom, then Netherlands, and then probably like about 6th is usually Australia. I mean, we're usually around the 6% mark. So I'm not really getting that many Australians watching my channel. But I've noticed that with these episodes, there's a lot more Australians watching, which is, of course, it's no surprise. But it's actually shot up to almost above people in the States. So, I mean, if you are an Australian watching this channel, I mean, please get in touch in the comments below and just say a hello. I know a lot of people do. I know a lot of people don't. So, I'm pretty keen to kind of meet some new faces, even though I can't see ya. And let me know if you're enjoying it. And if you live in a place like Kalgoorlie or Broken Hill or, anywhere else. Because I think it's really important to get some first-hand experiences of people who live in country towns. And because, I mean, I live in Sydney, so, I only know from times of when I've been to places outside of Sydney. And I used to live in a town, I used to live in Bathurst for university, which is, a bit more of a regional city, which is kind of what I'm going for right now. So definitely get in touch if you're watching and you live in a country town. I already said that, but there it is again. Here's the shopping complex that I was talking about before. And this is like a bit more of a stranger area for me. I mean, it's not like the classic row houses with the back lots and the parking. This is more of an entire business, or an entire block has just been dedicated to parking for one shopping complex. Now, you can see it over there in the top left corner. It's I'm pretty sure it's a vanilla building, and I've just spliced it in with a couple of other buildings just to make it a little bit more unique and to hide away some of the ugliness. I try to hide a lot of ugliness with props and with other buildings. I really try not to use many mods. I mean, even if mods are, they don't weigh much, they don't break games, I am still reluctant to download any mods and add it to the list, because, I mean, if you're anything like me, it's just, I mean, downloading assets and mods is just relentless. There's just far too many great mods and assets that I just want to get my hands on, and I can't stop downloading. So, you know, it's becoming a real problem. And once you kind of go, yeah, I'm just going to download one more, or I'm just going to download this one, then, you know, you have 2,000 mods and assets eventually, and it's just ridiculous. So, unless I see a total use for it, and I can't achieve the look in any other way, then I will get it. But if I can hide a prop or two and not have to download the mod, prop it up, then I'll probably keep on doing it. But I've had a crack at it, and it's a fantastic mod, and so are so many other mods. But I'm just so reluctant downloading more and more and more, because I've got way too many. But I mean, this is right. I mean, on a similar tangent, there is this asset that I'm using right now are these little grey blocks in between the parking. It's by King Leno, and I've been wanting something like this for ages and ages, and this is my first time using it. I'm also going to mix it in very shortly with a hedge that I'm pretty sure was introduced in the Green Cities update. Geez, what a pain in the ass that update was. I mean, in terms of mods and everything being updated, so our game wasn't crashing, mod creators did a fantastic job at helping us out there. But I mean, the actual update added so many assets that I'm never going to bloody use, except for their hedge probably. Everything else I've got no purpose for, and it's you know, we're forced to having these assets, which is just a real pain in the ass. So yeah, I mean, these hedges are actually really nice, so I'm going to use them. Everything else is a total piece of, well, you know, fill in the blank there. That is also my first time using the speed bumps, which adds tons, and I plan to use in heaps of this area and there's heaps of this build. Oh yeah, oh, by the way, I'm plopping down a caravan there. Now, I've plopped down tons of caravans in this city, in this town. The reason why I'm doing that is because a lot of people in Australia visit country towns in Australia via caravanning around the country. And so it's really important to put down heaps of different caravans and different, you know, RV vans and stuff like that. So, you know, you'll see quite a lot of caravans and stuff. I know when I went to Kalgoorlie, I went in a caravan and, you know, just drove around, and that was really awesome. So, you know, it's very iconic to plop down a lot of them. I'm sure that's the same in a lot of other countries too. This is my last little bits of the build. This is my favorite stretch of roads that I've probably ever built. Definitely ever built in this town. It's it just turns out really nice, and you'll see how I paint down some of these different textures. I classically drag away the shop fronts from the roads, and I just copy some of the parking that I made previously. As you can see, it doesn't fit exactly, but I can just kind of scoop it up with using Move It. And I'm also trying to experiment with just a couple of different roads textures. Somebody asked actually in the last episode what the deal was with no lines on the roads. Well, I'm going to be painting down my own lines, and that's because a lot of these places, even a lot of places in Australia, and I'm sure in other countries too, don't actually have road lines. Like, having road lines everywhere is actually kind of unrealistic and a little bit unnecessary. You don't really need it. In some areas, of course, where it's more populated and busier, there are more road lines, but in places like this, you just don't need them. Also, I've just plopped down a little bit of bus parking too. We have no bus system at the moment, and I'm not going to probably make a bus system until probably, I don't know, the 9th episode or something. When we have more of the road layouts, then I will start putting in more of that stuff. But that is a pretty nifty little bus section, just pop down there. I'm going to be using that quite in a lot of different areas as well. And you might have also seen me use a red decal to mark a bit of a footpath. I really love how that turned out. You'll see a lot more of that in the cinematics just around the corner, but I really love the way that turned out. I think it turned out just super cool. And the last little section, I am just detailing this Audi here. I mean, Audi, I'm pretty sure that's a Well, actually, I'm not even going to go there because I'm going to get the country wrong. But, you know, it's not an Australian brand. But I just, they're scattered all around Australia. And so I think it's really well fitting, especially in a small country town, to plop down an Audi because, yeah, they fit in really nicely. And it's, you know, it just adds to that realism. There's that path I was talking about. Just suits so nicely. I think it's works really, really well. And, you know, I don't have to plop it down everywhere. But it kind of just marks a little bit of a path of where pedestrians are going to be walking. For the last little part of the time lapse, I'm going to be plopping down some awnings that are going to act as awnings, funny enough, in front of the shop fronts. This is a very classic Australian move for me. It's, I don't know whether it's something in just all country towns and even towns in Australia, or whether this is something in just towns in general, but these awnings are very iconic. I really wish I could have put down some shop names in front of them because I think that would add a lot more to realism. But I really do love the fact that these are all rusted and stained. You know, it just makes it look like they're really old, which this town would be quite old. I mean, a lot of these towns in Australia, these historical towns, are really old, like 200, 300 years old. And I really want to make it look like it's a historical town. And like the history in Australia is really, really different to the history in any other parts of the world. So I'm really excited for you guys to kind of take that journey and learn a little bit about Australian history as we kind of dive a bit more into this town. But guys, that is practically it for this episode. So thanks again for tuning in. It always means a lot. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel because there's plenty more to come and lots more to talk about. And if you haven't already, hitting the like button actually helps a lot of other people check out my channel, and it's super encouraging for me because I check regularly, and I'm always loving that people are tuning in. A couple of things I spoke about in this episode. If you're an Australian and you haven't said hello yet, please say hello and get in touch because I will need your help in developing this town and with a bit of your advice. If you're a mod or asset creator and you want to make me a billboard advertising some of our fine beers, definitely do that too. And anyone else, if you are from a country town in another country, please hit me up and tell me, is this similar to towns in your country or totally different? Similar, differences, hit me up. Anyway guys, that is it. Thanks again for tuning in and I'll see you in the next episode. See ya.